What is Kenshi, and why does it seem to have such weirdly lasting niche appeal? That's what this video is going to be, told through a story of my run. But before that, let's talk about this. So, like many people apparently, once a year I go back and play Kenshi. This year I decided to go look at its Steam charts to see just how popular was this game. And I was surprised to learn that after releasing down here in 2018, its popularity did wane because it doesn't get any updates, it doesn't get any new content, it doesn't get anything by the developers. They're working on Kenshi 2 right now to try to solve some issues. Back in 2021, 2022, the game actually rose up in popularity, and it's basically maintained that popularity forever. The game really doesn't go up or down in popularity, it just remains popular forever. So I had the question, why is that? Especially because when I looked over here, videos on Kenshi continue to get made and they continue to get hundreds of thousands of views. This game, far from being dead, continues to cultivate an audience that really just likes playing Kenshi. Now, why is that? To begin to even understand Kenshi, you kind of have to know how the game starts. You're right here, you're in the main menu, and what do? You click on New Game. You choose your beginning, pretty much everybody's going to choose Wanderer, and then away you go. There's no cinematic, there's no flair, there's no introduction, there's nothing special whatsoever. You just choose how you're going to start your game. You are deposited into a wasteland with nothing. In fact, you have 1,000 gold. You have a mere rag loincloth, which will defend you from absolutely nothing, and you have an iron club, which will probably lose to a, well, basically anything in a fight. You start with nothing. You start with absolutely nothing in this game. There's no direction. There's no quest. There's nothing. You're starting in a destroyed town in the middle of nowhere in an absolute ruin. That's it. Start the game. Go. I'm gonna start talking about my run about 3 hours in. How you start your Kenshi run, that really depends on you. Most people are gonna find loot on dead bodies. Maybe they'll lure enemies into town guards. Maybe you'll get lucky and find some dead bounties that you can turn in. Maybe you'll mine for copper. For me, to get to this far, it took me about 3 hours. And at this stage, I have 4 people. I hadn't really done much combat. I was definitely a loot rat, I'm gonna call it. All I did was I found other groups that were fighting and I collected loot from the bodies. When I wasn't able to find anyone to loot, we went and we got copper, and that's all we did. So I eventually managed to worm my way up to having 4 different companions. We had Guthuk, Sir Camelot, Miao Zedong, and Ruka. Just named Ruka because that's one of the companions you can get. And all we did was run around the countryside and, well, I guess call it the wasteland, and all we did was scrounge loot from other people. Anytime we could fight enemies, we fought them, so long as we outnumbered them. If we ever fought anyone that we didn't outnumber, we didn't do so good. And the whole combat thing, we really didn't do that good. Through continuing to scrounge more loot, we eventually got a 5th member of our party, West. West fell many times. The West fell many times. The combat aspect of our group continued to go poorly. Now, let me explain Kenshi combat to you guys. The tougher enemies you fight, the more stats you get. The worse enemies you fight, the less stats you get. But you kind of have to start somewhere. See, all the characters you get started one melee attack, 1 melee defense, 1 toughness, 1 strength, everything. You cannot get toughness without getting hit. You cannot get melee defense without getting hit. The game requires you to get hit. There's basically a hazing process, in fact, in this game. You will fight the lowliest enemies imaginable. You will fight the worst starving bandits, and they will absolutely lay into you. And it will feel funny, I guess. I mean, to me, I play the game and it's just funny to me, of course, right? You fight starving bandits and they kick your ass, and you try to fight them again and they kick your ass. There's a lot more of them than there are of you. But I guess in a way that's kind of how the game is. You can choose to have a lot of companions and you can try to actually fight the starving bandits, or you can try to cheese them out, maybe chase them into other people, level out your stats or do whatever. But the game requires you, at a certain point, you have to start somewhere. You have to start training your combat in some way, and it'll probably be against starving bandits that absolutely wreck you. The upside, I guess, of getting your ass kicked in Kenshi is that when you do get your ass kicked, you level up your stats. You level up your toughness super quickly. You level up your melee defense super quickly. Any attacks you land, you level up your strength, your dexterity, your melee attack. If you dodge attacks, you level up your dodge. If you AoE into lots of starving bandits, you level up a lot. All you have to do is pick yourself up at the end of combat. You have to pick yourself up, heal yourself in a bed, and you have to go back out there to get your ass kicked again. That's actually, in all honesty, that's probably the best thing about Kenshi that never really gets discussed. The fact that after you get your ass kicked in Kenshi, now you don't go load the game. You don't go load a previous save, because you can't do that. You have to get your ass kicked to level up your stats, right? The game forces you. You cannot go load a save where you win every combat. If you win every combat decisively, you're not going to level up your stats in any meaningful way. But when you get your ass kicked, you will level up your stats a lot. And that's something that's very different between Kenshi and practically any other game I've played. In practically any other game I've played, if you get your ass kicked, you load a save or you start a new run. There's really no choice, right? But in Kenshi, enemies will not do much to you after you're attacked, after you're downed. They'll knock you out. Maybe starving bandits will steal your food, but at the end of the day, they're not going to kill your characters. You wait for them to regain consciousness, you get up again. They're not going to spawn camp you, they're not going to do anything like that. And that's just kind of a fundamental Kenshiism. I'm going to call it a Kenshiism here. It's where you're going to lose combat, but at the end of the day, you just pick yourself up, you get more stats, you get stronger, and you get back out there and you try again. So for me and the Guthuk Gang at this point in time, we were trying to pick as many fights as we could with as many enemies as we could, and we were trying to gang up on them, because the more times we hit them, the more we were leveling up our melee attack. Now, getting our ass kicked is great and all, but all that's doing is leveling up toughness and melee defense. We need enemies that we can attack a lot in order to level up our melee attack and our strength and our dexterity and things like that. Now, these enemies we were fighting, the white eyebrow bandits, I think they were, that's definitely from a mod. Normally you would only be fighting dust bandits, but in this mod they were the white eyebrow bandits. There was definitely something screwy going on, and they seemed to spawn maybe a bit more than they should have, and also their martial arts was a bit good. One of them seemed to spam the flying kick a lot. I was not a fan of the flying kick. It really kicked my ass, but in a way that's kind of how Kenshi is, in my opinion. You download mods, and the thing I love about the Kenshi community, I actually love this about them, almost every mod in this game does not make the game easier. Almost all of them make the game harder. There's just like some unspoken agreement between all Kenshi players that, look, if you're gonna download a mod, it shouldn't make the game easier, it's here to make the game harder. In a lot of other games I've played, they'll always make the game easier with mods. It'll always be a mod where it's like, oh, your character is faster, stronger, oh, you get more experience, things like that. Almost all the popular Kenshi mods and almost all the ones that continue to be released, and mods do get released all the time, they always add more enemies, more difficult enemies, stronger enemies, enemies that do this. I mean, one of the more popular mods was just a giant spider that one-shot you even through full late game super armor. Why? I don't know. It was just funny. It's just a funny thing. I don't know, dude. I just love that about Kenshi mods. If you want to compare here for a second the White Eyebrow clan to what would be the vanilla Dust Bandits, see, the vanilla Dust Bandits kind of don't spawn this hard, and they definitely don't spawn this aggressively next to cities. I was a bit out of my element, but look, every time you download a mod in Kenshi, you're kind of flipping a coin, right? You're going, how is this gonna go? And, you know, sometimes it goes very poorly, and you just kind of eat the L, because, look, mods for Kenshi are kind of like, look, sometimes they go well, sometimes they don't go well, and you just kind of have to adjust to your new environment. See, I adjusted how any normal person would adjust to my environment. I ran away, and we decided to put our beds a little bit further away from the enemies. Now, I was waiting, of course. We were watching my people heal up, and well, sure, wouldn't you know it, in comes spawning more White Eyebrow clan while I'm sitting at 3 speed, and they just started kicking my ass again. I really wasn't sure what to do with this one. I put my bed so far away, and they were spawning so aggressively. They were kicking my ass all the way on that side. I was trying to 2v1 them, I was trying to do anything, but no, I mean, once I took away their weapons, if I ever knocked them out and took away their weapons, they only seemed to get stronger. Their martial arts apparently made them even stronger, and they apparently were spawning so aggressively that even the town guard, the mighty town guard with all their insane stats, seemed to kind of start to get overwhelmed by them too. So we put our beds even further away, and that helped for a little bit, but boy, they just kept spawning. I don't really know other way to put it. I mean, every time I tried to pick a fight and I was like, okay, we're 5-2, surely we got them this time. I'd be managing my people, because of course it's kind of like a team RPG squad based thing, and you're managing your people, trying to not, you know, get them to group up and get AoE'd by the enemy's attacks, and sure enough, they just keep spawning. The town guard are very highly stat in this game. They're very aggressively high stat characters that are mostly supposed to be for the late game. And despite that, well, as you can see, the White Eyebrow clan managed to beat them with pure skill, talent, and like hundreds of them spawning. Okay, I'll admit something to you. I play with 1.5 times world population because I like having lots of roaming squads. Now, normally these roaming squads are easier to beat. These ones were obviously not as easy to beat. I could easily have turned down the world population back towards a vanilla 1.0, but I wasn't going to give up. So what did I do? I collected all the swords on the bandits, any of the ones I could find, because they were fighting the guards and they were fighting me and they were fighting everyone, and I collected all the swords I could and I just started to sell them because they were selling for a lot. Unfortunately, the White Eyebrow bandits started to spawn so much that they were actually making their way into the town. Now, someone might think that that's a bad thing, but that actually spelled out a lot of opportunity to me. See, the guards are quite powerful. And of course, that means that these very powerful guards were killing these White Eyebrow clan bandits whose swords I could collect. And I started to collect all these different swords, and by collecting their swords and their backpacks and selling all of them, I was able to go into the Shek encampment. The Shek city is behind me. These are basically space Klingon people. These are honor-bound super warriors. That's also why they fight so well. They were absolutely demolishing them. I mean, if they even had a fifth of their numbers, they would have wrecked through them. But at any rate, the Shek city behind me sold some pretty good weapons. They were literally selling the weapons the White Eyebrow clan was using, but in a higher quality. See, items in Kenshi, most of the items dropped by enemies are going to be white. They're going to be white or they're going to be gray. And there's multiple degrees of white and gray, but at the end of the day, they're going to be white or they're going to be gray. Higher tiers above that are blue, which are pretty good quality weapons. Above that are green, which are really good quality weapons. And above that are yellow, which are you're only going to find that on named characters or in very specific locations. Those are like the super elite weapons. Because you have to remember, Kenshi is a post-apocalyptic game, despite the fact that we're still using swords and stuff like that. There are old manufacturers, old forges, things like that. And they can actually make good weapons, but almost all the ones out there in the world are going to be bad. That's kind of how the game scales itself to keep things interesting, right? Because early in the game, you get whites off enemies, whites, grays. You can buy some blues. You can also buy some greens. In the case, the cost starts going up extravagantly, right? Going from a good white item to a blue item, it might cost like 7 times more for like a 10% damage boost. And then going from a blue to a green, we might cost again 7 times more for like another 10% damage boost. So that's kind of how the game's scaling works and how it kind of keeps things interesting. When you and all your squad keep needing all these different weapons, you might settle for the blue weapons at first because, you want to get a leg up on the enemies to level up quicker, because of course your leveling isn't based on how good your weapon is or anything like that, right? If you beat up enemies using good weapons, that's just as much XP as getting your ass beat with bad weapons. And that's kind of how I progressed right here. We just kept taking what we could out of the White Eyebrow clan. We kept taking what we could out of them. And, well, that's about it. I mean, at the end of the day, they were spawning pretty aggressively. And I was not about to give up and turn down my world population spawning. Now, I don't know how many times you can be kicked in the face before you finally decide to run away, but that number definitely hit us in the face at this point. So the Guthuk Gang quite literally ran for the hills and got out of there. We really just were tired of being kicked in the face. We weren't really making much progress. We were making a decent amount of money, but we weren't really progressing our skills as much as we wanted to. Now, how are we gonna use this money to progress? Of course, we go and we hire Gustavsen, the 6th member of the team. And this introduces something that a lot of Kenshi videos and a lot of people that even talk about the game don't really talk about. Now, we've seen the inventory management. When you pick up items off enemies, you kind of compare how much inventory space the item uses compared to how much you're going to sell it. If items don't sell for a lot, you really need to weigh if you even are going to bother picking up an item like that. It kind of brings back that old kind of vibe of some of the older school games where you just kind of, you're in a lot of ways, you're selling items to buy better items. Now, of course, you can abuse stealth, and stealth is very overpowered in this game, and do solo runs. But if you want to do a non-stealth run and you really want to not just sit there and grind out, eventually you're gonna end up having more people than just one. A lot of people seem to settle on 3 to 5 people is a good number. I went beyond that this time. This is one thing that Kenshi actually does really good. In a lot of ways, Kenshi is a squad-based RPG. Now, every member in your squad gets their own stats, they level up their own abilities, and you're gonna have to find them equipment. And equipping your party, getting them better items, managing their skills, trying to make sure that you've put a hacker on or a cleaver on or a katana on. You need to get them better katanas because they've got a lot of skills in katanas. And That's also something that I didn't really talk about. The more skill you have in a weapon, the better animations you'll use. A hacker, for example, the weapons we're using, early on you kind of swing them like baseball bats and they're not really that great, but later on you can do double attacks or really fast attacks or wide cleaving attacks that'll hit lots of enemies. At any rate, we got our ass kicked by the White Eyebrow clan for so long to level up a lot, and we got a new member to our team, so I decided to try to pick a fight with normal bandits. And this is another Kenshiism. See, a Kenshiism is when you spend so much time leveling up against one group of enemies that when you go fight another group of enemies, even one tier lower, you'll very quickly destroy them, or at the very least do significantly better than you're used to. This Kenshiism is the feeling of progression, because even if you move up your attack and defense 5 points, you will rapidly find yourself very clearly capable of destroying groups who were otherwise destroying you. So, although we were outnumbered, and although these bandits had kicked our ass all of a couple hours ago, we were now able to take them on 6v9 and come out ahead. It was actually a pretty good victory. Another thing is that Kenshi, you kind of need to pay attention. It is more of a real-time strategy game once you have all these people in your squad. It's more of a real-time strategy game than a lot of people think, because you don't want to keep your group members, well, grouped up. See, when an enemy swings, or when you swing, the person you're swinging at, they will try to block the attack, but all the people around that person won't try to block it. So if you swing into a group of enemies, you can end up getting a lot of hits in them, so you want to spread out your squad. There's also some crossbow units. I use crossbow people later to support me, but these units will sit in the back, shoot, and try to do a lot of damage to you. Now, if you get shot by a crossbow, you'll get hit stunned. And if an enemy is swinging at you right as you get hit by a crossbow, you'll be hit stunned, therefore unable to block, and then you'll take 2 hits right, back to back. That's not very good. So you will have to flank around the opposing team. You'll have to hit the crossbow users. You got to keep your people spread out. And there's just something mesmerizing about Kenshi fights. I could sit there and watch them for quite some time because I really like the animations in them. Just as you start feeling good, however, Kenshi will kick you back down. There's one thing that Kenshi is a very good game at, and it's putting you in your place. It needs to make sure that it beats you up constantly. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, that's how you level up, and the game's not really going to try to kill your characters. It's just going to beat the crap out of you constantly and kind of make fun of you. So we tried to fight the White Eyebrow clan again, having succeeded over the previous bandits, and it didn't go well. It didn't go well again. We got our ass kicked again. There's not really much to say on that. So the Guthuk Gang headed out, and we started to fight some starving bandits. Unfortunately, Gustafsson had lost his leg fighting the White Eyebrow clan, and as we were fighting starving bandits, just regular starving bandits, just regular old starving bandits, I saw a leg go flying off in the distance, and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be so funny if on his first adventure, after like 3 fights, if Gustafsson had actually managed to lose both his legs? And when I clicked on him, I saw he had actually lost both his legs, I couldn't help but laugh at the luck of it all. The misfortune for Gustafsson, but just how funny it was for me. Unfortunately, when we went to go get Gustafsson some fine legs, better legs than he ever had before, I remembered I spent all my gold on really dumb stuff. So we got him the worst legs we possibly could, and I promised him, I said, Gustafsson, we will get you better legs eventually. I immediately ran to attack a large group of bandits, thinking if I can beat these guys and get all their money, we can get Gustafsson at least one good leg. Unfortunately, I remember that the only 2 people good at fighting are Guthuk and Ruka, and that Guthuk and Ruka, being only 2 people, can't really beat 12 bandits on their own. So once again, we got our ass kicked, which, boy, that really set us off on the adventure of how can we stop getting our ass kicked and actually get some money to get Gustafsson some new legs. You might notice we've got a new member of the group, Flog. Flog uses a crossbow. Now, why is having an extra crossbow character such a big deal? See, default-wise in Kenshi, only one character can be attacking another character at a time. Now, one character can attack, and then another character can instantly attack, and then another character can instantly attack, but only one character can actually be attacking at a time. This means that outnumbering your enemies doesn't really mean that much if you're massively outskilled, but crossbow users can actually shoot enemies who are still being attacked, and as I mentioned earlier, they can hit stun them letting all your characters attack them very easily. So as your party starts reaching a certain size, you do want some range characters sitting in the back, hit stunning enemies, and generally supporting your squad. This all takes us back to how does this help us get Gustav's new legs? Well, by beating the crap out of some White Lotus or whatever these guys are called anymore, we would be able to take their loot and then sell that loot, is what I would be saying had there not been slave traders watching us. See, slave traders are this neutral slash evil party. Now what they do is if any character is knocked on the ground unconscious, they enslave them, which, you know, can go with or against you. Sometimes they'll help you by attacking a party that's partially knocked down and trying to enslave them, and sometimes they'll really annoy you by trying to enslave your own people. See, even if you're standing right next to your own people, if they're knocked unconscious on the ground, the slave traders will run up and try to enslave them. This can be a big problem. Now we have to fight off the slave traders because they run up and immediately try to enslave Flog, who's on the ground. Flog, our newest recruit, is not very tough yet. He's going to need to get a lot of ass kickings. At either rate, now with our wounds barely bandaged, we need to fight off the slave traders. Fortunately, they're not very good at fighting, and we managed to get out ahead of them. The White Eyebrow clan do have valuable swords for us to sell, but the slave traders don't really have anything valuable for us. All we get is a little bit of experience and not much else. So we bandage our wounds after 2 big fights and try to go rest when, of course, you know it, more White Eyebrow clan come to fight us. There's now 3 groups of enemies that we have to fight. Fortunately, we've been getting our ass kicked so much throughout this entire run that we do actually manage to come out ahead of the White Eyebrow clan. It's a tough fight, it's a long fight, and there is blood everywhere after all these different groups have gotten down, but we come out ahead. We now have the swords from 1 squad of White Eyebrow clan, 2 squads of them in fact, and the semi-valuable but mostly useless weapons from slave traders. We still don't have enough money for a leg for Gustavsen, but we're getting much closer. We're at least making progress. As we've said, stats in Kenshi never go down, they only continue to go up. Therefore, that last ass kicking seemed to have been the one that finally got our stats into a position where we could kick every enemy's ass that we came across. So we just sort of had a montage of destroying every enemy. We were able to easily afford both the Gustavsen's new legs that weren't debuffing him, as well as afford a new leg for Flog, as every new recruit seemed to get a limb chopped off by the White Eyebrow clan. We were kind of really getting tired of the White Eyebrow clan. They were chopping off all our limbs, and all we were doing was farming up money to replace the limbs. So the Guthuk Gang thought, what could we do at this point in time to try to get actual advancement? We decided to go take down some bounties. We weren't really sure that we could take down any of the actual tough bounties, but we could go take down the rebel farmers all the way in the east in the United Cities. In order to get to the United Cities, we had to go through the Holy Nation. We didn't really see much of them because they're very racist and they're very misogynistic, and of course Ruka being a female Shek, then they would have killed her on sight, so it probably wasn't a good idea to take Ruka in there. Going above the Holy Nation though, we came across the Femininjas. The Femininjas are people who live in the Cannibal Forest. The Femininjas are of course an all-female ninja gang. Although they're not all-female, they fight against the Holy Nation because the Holy Nation, as I mentioned, is extremely sexist. So a group of badass female ninjas fight against them. I'm not making this up. They actually have a backstory. They have books. You can read about it in game. There's actually a lot of lore in Kenshi that if you actually take the time to read, it's not actually badly written. It's actually quite well written. The female ninjas, the Femininjas, are actually kind of cool, and you can go recruit one of them, which is where we got our next recruit. This one would actually be a pretty good katana user who could actually use one of the very good katanas that I had gotten. So we had another actually hopefully good melee user on the party. The world of Kenshi actually has a lot of different aesthetic choices to differentiate all the different zones and make it feel like you're kind of living in an actual world that isn't just one sort of biome. Out in the west you have the more generic post-apocalyptic look to it, but out in the east you have a great sandy desert. I think it's just called the Great Desert. There are other areas like a swamp, fogland, an evil island, coast area, forests, jungles, and really I think although the game started development in 2013, the aesthetic choices and artistic direction of the game keeps it looking pretty good, so that honestly even now I think that this game just looks absolutely fine right now. I am using some mods that enhance it and definitely draw out a bit more saturation and things like that from it, but overall the look, the vibe is the same as it's ever been, and I just wanted to appreciate that for a second because Kenshi has a very realistic look to it, and yet still looks pretty good, and a lot of the areas look obviously very different from each other. The Heroes League of the United Cities sat here and hurled racist insults at my Shek until eventually they attacked me. When they attacked me, the guards were running up to us, and I assumed that the guards are here to attack me with them. Actually, the guards defended me against them, and we easily killed them because the guards are very, very powerful. That sort of reminds me of the differences between the United Cities and the Holy Nation. I mentioned earlier that the Holy Nation is very racist, very misogynistic, etc, etc, etc. They're kind of a religious extreme, but don't take that to mean that there's some caricature or quite weak. The ingenious thing about the Holy Nation is actually that they're so powerful, they're so overbearing, that you end up having to try to comply with them and to work within their rules, because otherwise they will utterly obliterate you. They are not weak at all. The United Cities, on the other hand, is more of a post-apocalyptic take on a capitalistic society. All these societies in the world of Kenshi are obviously a post-apocalyptic society that needs to exist, so they're very harsh and they're kind of realistic in that. The United Cities are a slave-based society that prides itself on being something of a meritocracy, but obviously is just an oligarchy where being poor is outlawed. And I don't mean that lightly. Being poor is outlawed. If you don't have much on you, they will try to arrest you and bring you into slavery on the crime of being poor. However, they do not seem to actually be racist, and when the Heroes League was trying to attack me for their racism, they did defend me against them, so I can say they at least did that. One of the big successes of the world building of Kenshi is that of the two remaining big factions, the Holy Nation and the United Cities, they kind of compete with each other for who's worse. Both of them are slave-based societies, but hey, I mean, at least the Holy Nation won't enslave you on a whim. They'll only enslave you if you're unconscious on the ground. The United Cities, on the other hand, have the Manhunters, and the Manhunters will literally just walk up to you and just go, you kind of look like an escaped slave, let's just enslave you. So after tons of journeying, we finally found the hideout of the rebel farmers. Now, the rebel farmers are pretty much the good guys of this setting. They're a bunch of farmers who've been being harassed by the United Cities because the United Cities demands you pay taxes, and if you pay the taxes and the poor, then you get arrested for being poor and you get enslaved. The rebel farmers are rebelling against this system. They are very much the good guys. Unfortunately, as a faction, they're not very fleshed out. Unlike the Femininjas, you can't join them. They don't have lore. They have a little bit of a book explaining their backstory. I mean, their backstory is pretty obvious if you're even paying the faintest bit of attention to this setting, but there's not really a whole lot you can do with them. And they do have a big bounty, and they are kind of a cool settlement, if you want to call it that, to attack and raid and defeat. So that's exactly what I did. I thought they would probably be the easiest kind of boss, if you want to call it a boss in the game, to defeat. So I figured, let's attack the rebel farmers and take them down, get the bounty. The Guthuk Gang had been on a roll. We hadn't lost a fight in quite some time, and I thought to myself, let's just walk right in the front door. Let's challenge the leader of the rebel farmers and all their captains to a fight. And I did that, and it went poorly. So I loaded my save and I thought, okay, maybe that was a fluke. Maybe I did something wrong. So I tried it again and I took them on and we got literally obliterated a second time. So I loaded my save again and I said, okay, well, let's try to not actually die and wipe our entire run here. So I went back out the front door and I decided to try to slowly eke my way in. And they all ran out and they obliterated me a third time. So we load back to that save and, well, we were kind of running out of ideas. So we decided, let's creep through the front slowly. Let's only pick a few of them at a time. Make sure to mind our aggro. Only pick a fight with a few of them. And boy, oh boy, unfortunately there were a lot of rebel farmers out there. And we were getting our ass kicked. Again, something I guess great about Kenshi is that no matter how far ahead you think you are still going to be getting your ass kicked. So we got shooed away and we decided, well, okay, maybe let's come back and we'll figure out a way to get stronger. After I retreated to heal, it kind of became obvious really quickly that we had an issue. Although Guthuk and Ruka had good armor, I had kind of been a bit dismissive of the rest of the party. Everyone else's armor was not exactly great. It was good for the time when we had gotten it, but it clearly wasn't up to snuff anymore. So we had to kind of play this game more of a squad-based RPG, and we kind of had to actually pay attention to the rest of the squad. We needed money so that we could buy everyone else armor upgrades and they could tank longer. Although Guthuk and Ruka were definitely capable of killing everyone else, we needed to buy them time. The numbers which we had to fight the enemies with, this wasn't 5 people we were fighting or even 10, we were fighting 20 and even 30 rebel farmers at a time. The rest of the crew needed to tank for longer, so Guthuk and Ruka had more time to kill everybody. So how are we going to get the gold for that? Well, it was actually really obvious when I thought about it. We stage a daring, heroic night raid on the rebel farmers, and we kind of bait a few of their captains out. After those captains leave the safety of the fort, we knock them out, we arrest them, and we heroically and righteously turn them into the United Cities for their bounty. Then we use that bounty to buy better armor. And that's where we end off for now. With better armor, surely the rest of our party can tank for longer and we can defeat the evil rebel farmers. The purpose of me telling that entire story was to try to show you guys that Kenshi is the ultimate game for just sort of wandering around aimlessly. You don't need a goal in Kenshi. Some people say you need to make your own goal, and in a way, you do. But the world of Kenshi is somewhat stagnant. Enemies tend to not really level up on their own. Enemies tend to not really do much on their own. The entire world waits for you to interact with it. In other games, that could be seen as a very bad thing. In Kenshi, I think that works out in its favor. You can take as long or as short as you want in Kenshi, and the world will be right there, and you can just take your time to do whatever you want, and you can just go have fun with it. I don't really know any better way to explain it. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. If you guys like this, maybe I'll continue videos like this, but otherwise, thank you all for watching, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.